Good. The thing we got going here, and it's good. Should move that over a little bit too. Okay. Yeah, you know, I'll tell you, my stories are almost similar to yours in that I think the Sicilians all wanted land because they couldn't have land in Sicily. So the idea, my great-grandparents were buying land in Monroe, and that they valued getting land.
Ownership is, well, if you look at some countries, even European countries, you don't have the right to vote unless you own land. I mean, that was going on for a while.
Yes.
So owning land actually meant that you owned part of something. If you don't own anything, you rent something, what do you own? You don't own anything but the clothes on your back. So we had rental property for most of my life. And that was the other thing, with the rental property being a 10 or 12-year-old male, you're gonna go to the rental property and you're gonna go paint. And you would paint all day. And it was like, there was no negotiations. This is what you're going to do. And by the time you're 12, you would get 2 pieces of chicken, we'll be back in 4 hours. I expect this room painted. That was the type of deal. And it was like, you know, sometimes you kind of thought it was unfair, but it made you who you are. I mean, they had rental property and they would self-finance. The people would not pay. They came back to them 2 or 3 times. They sold one property 3 times over 15 years because it kept on coming back to them because people wouldn't maintain them and they didn't make their payments, so they came back. So finally they said, we're completely selling it. We're not financing anymore. But my parents were never, they didn't take a lot of excuses. This is, you know, it wasn't like, this weekend we're doing yard work. Well, no, we're doing yard work this weekend. That's what we're doing. And it was a different time, different culture, but it wasn't abusive. It was just part of what the family had to do. This is your house and you need to maintain it. So we did that. We used to love to fish and crab a lot. Oh, God. With my grandmother, we used to crab off the bayou. We had a place on the bayou. And we used to crab just massively. And I can remember spending time with Grandma. She had a house that was built in the 20s. And it was on the bayou, no air conditioning. It had windows that you could open. And that's what you did for cooling and ventilation. Only later on did we put air conditioning in it so that when the whole family got together, you could do it. But we would crab, we would fish, we would make bread, we would make pasta from scratch, you know, and we would have dinner. And you can ask Linda and some of the other people that would go to those dinners. It's never been as good. And I don't know if it was the people, I don't know if it was the food, but it was never as good. And we had all of our cousins. You'd have, I mean, Easter egg hunts were people everywhere, you know? And some of the people where you think, oh, that cousin's weird, but he was your cousin, he was your family. No matter what, he was your family. So you always had to bond to that person. So that I can't get to my children. So I'm a failure in that part, that I can't bring that to them because I don't think that exists anymore. I don't know. I mean, in my family, it didn't because we weren't all Italian and we didn't do the same things, but it was, that was a childhood.
We have a challenge today because when I can be remember being a little child in the 60s, what you just described happened in Monroe. Easter egg hunts, a wedding, there was an Italian building, a clubhouse, it's been sold. People, as the years went by, they did not marry Italians, so now people are half, quarter, 1/8 Italian, and
it's diluted.
Yes, but the Italians are working to reinvent how we try to get back in the generation that is 1/4, 1/8, to show that there's value in the Italian heritage. And what you said today was the work ethic, and I can think of my grandparents. I mean, my grandfather, he turned his restaurant over to his kids, but then he went and opened up another restaurant. You know, he was not going to sit home.
He was bored.
He was bored. And the first restaurant was an Italian place, but he had an empty building down the street, and he decided to sell hot dogs and tamales. But he wasn't going to, he retired, but then he was a competitor to his kids in a way. I mean,
I make really good barbecue. And everybody said, I would always tell me, you need to open a restaurant, you need to open a restaurant. So there was a point in time when I says, I want to open a restaurant. And my wife at the time said, well, what are you going to do? Have your kids work there? And I said, yeah, they're going to do their homework in a booth. They're going to get paid. They're going to have their college paid for. And then when I retire, I'm going to give them the restaurant. And we were talking about that one time at a campfire in the woods with a bunch of friends. And one of the ladies there said, she goes, that's crazy. I would never make my kid do there. And the lady says, I'm Italian, and I worked in our family restaurant. And I was that kid in that booth. And she says, I have a doctorate in mathematics and I teach at UCLA now. So their family has 3 restaurants because she had 4 kids. And the other ones went and took the restaurants over, and she got the degree, so she's doing the math. So that's a true story. So I don't know. I don't know what the deal is. You know, I mean, I can remember the first time there was Chef Boyardee or whatever, they canned spaghetti in my house. I was like, oh my God, this is not gonna, I threw it out. This is not the way you eat spaghetti. This is not it. You know, we don't do it that way, you know? And they go, what's this lasagna? It takes all day to make lasagna. Yes, it takes all day because you got to make the sauce. And people don't understand that. They don't understand the culture. They don't understand the camaraderie. It's not there anymore.
No, it's not. And we have to do an extra effort because things have changed. But today, maybe through technology and documenting the stories with video and other methods, we can look to bring back some of the stuff that's been lost. Because clearly...
We can only hope.
You can only hope. I mean, but I agree with you. I was bussing tables at 12 at my grandfather's restaurant. My cousin was doing that. Then he was a waiter, and now he's a lawyer. So things do change. But that restaurant has been there for 57 years, since 1964. And that you have those bonds. You're right. That is part of the culture. But I left New Orleans and went out to California because economy changed. I'm an engineer. Like in a way you
move away from home. Yeah.
But I did find... we do find that there are Italian communities spread out, and as we learned today, a lot of people, because of what was going on, left and had to go find a different place to live. Perhaps the culture got lost in those issues.
But my parents ingrained that I would always work. I mean, my kids were like, it was like torture to get them to walk. I can remember I was 12 years old, and I was going to be home one summer. And Mom says, what are you going to do all summer? I says, I got a job. She goes, you're 12, because I'd been cutting grass at 10 till 12. And in Houston, cutting grass, because people would only do it once a month, it was a really terrible job. The grass was really high, and they'd only pay you once, you know, and you'd have to work there all day. So I told him, I says, I got a job at a Chinese food restaurant. She goes, you're 12. And I says, well, I lied about my age. You know, and she says, okay, sure. So I get on my bike and I go ride to this place, and my parents go, they didn't believe me, I don't think. So who shows up for dinner but my parents? And they go, he got a job. And I go, yeah, I got a job. And I was making good money all summer. I was making $3 an hour when I was 12, and I was getting 1/3 the tips, and I was making really money. That helped me buy a car. And she goes, I remember I could hear her telling my dad, he really went and got a job. So the reason I got a job was because my parents really didn't give me a lot. They said, if you want something, my dad said this too, if you want something, everything's outside the door, so go get it. So they instilled that work ethic that I have today. So.
Wow. Frank, I want to thank you for being on the show.
Thanks.
And stay tuned. We'll be right back with more of Celebrating Culture.
Thank you.
And let me do that one more time.
Okay.
Frank, I want to thank you for being on the show.
Thank you.
And a pleasure hearing your stories and the passion your families, learning about how your family overcame such adversity to develop into such great people, and what a legacy that your grandfather has put on from being an orphan. So
yes. Thank you.
Stay tuned. We'll be right back with more of Celebrating Culture. Should be up. Let me see if I got. Yep, we're good.